let's welcome Mr. Groover.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for coming in. It's a beautiful day. You guys are skipping out on the Greek festival, I think.
That one wasn't.
Yeah.
Messed up all the traffic.
And the Denver Nuggets and the Oklahoma City Thunder are about to start playing Game 7. Just gonna mute I'm just gonna stay on airplane mode until I get home. But anyway, but yeah, my name is Keith. This is the instrument one of the instruments I've invented, but kind of the latest one, or not even the latest one, the biggest one, I guess. And I set out to just kind of mess around about, I don't know, 8 years ago. And I ended up just kind of iterating and, just kind of messing around a lot. And so anyway, I'm going to play it a little bit. And then I'll kind of walk through how it works. I'll walk through a little bit of the history, a little bit of the challenges of making a musical instrument. And then I brought in another instrument that I've invented and talk about the future of that one. So anyway, what am I going to play? So let me tell you just real quick how it works, kind of the basics of it, and then I'll talk about kind of how I made it and why. So basically, you got 3 buttons on this hand, and you've got a thumbstick that's up here, and you've got a button in the back. And then on this hand, you got 2 buttons, one on the top, or one on the side, one on the top, and then you've got a little button right here that does a bunch of function stuff. I can change options and things like that. So I can turn stuff on and off. So for instance, like the glide stuff, this, I can turn that off, and so it doesn't do that anymore. And there's a reason for that, why you would want to do that. And then things like volume. So did I already turn it off? I guess I can turn that off as well. And why would I do that? It's about the learning curve of how to play the instrument. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, but anyway, let me talk about why I did this. I've been a tinkerer for a long time. Like messing around with my guitar. Like that's kind of my primary instrument. I invented I called it the pop box, where basically I took like an Altoids box and had a little button on it and a little switch, and basically you could mute the guitar unless you hit the switch. And I invented that. I was really proud, and then I found out like 20 other people have invented that also. But it was kind of a cool intro to it. I worked a long time on another little thing that was another guitar thing, where you had kind of like a little box that would hover over the strings, and then you would instead of like picking a note, you would push like 2 buttons, go. And I worked a long time on it, and then I got the functional prototype, and I was like, this is not enjoyable at all. And like the whole point of playing guitar is that you actually hit the strings instead of having like a little mechanical device. And then I invented a new way to write guitar music, and a couple other little things, and had a bunch of like ideas about how to do new musical stuff. But I've always wanted to invent an instrument from scratch, where you're just going the whole thing, and I didn't know how to do that. So I guess it was about, I think it was like 2017, something like that. I ran across this video on YouTube of somebody who had taken an accelerometer, and I'll talk about it in a second, but they had taken an accelerometer and they had made kind of like this air drum thing where like you made a motion and it would go do 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 do. And it was not very impressive. It wasn't very good, but I saw it and I was like, I bet I could do something with that. And I started getting the idea is like, what if I did something that was kind of like a drum, but it was like you made a hitting motion, but then it like did a melody line or did chords or something like that. So first idea was to have like a keyboard, and you would hold down a note on a keyboard, and then you would hit the note over here. Because on a keyboard, it's kind of hard to go like, like multiple repeated notes, and that was a way that you maybe could do that. And then I was like, I started looking into these accelerometers, and I realized they're extremely fast, they're extremely cheap, and they're extremely small too. So what an accelerometer is, it's a tiny little device. It's called a MEMS device, which stands for something, micro something. I don't know. Chris, what does it stand for? Oh, come on. Chris has stuff that's like in outer space. Is it still in outer space?
I hope not.
All right, hope not. Okay. So anyway, it's a very tiny little device. It's about, I don't know, it's probably like 2 grains of sand lined up next to each other. And what it does is it detects acceleration. And all of you have used accelerometers because they're in your phones. So whenever you whenever you have a phone, mine's over there. Anyway, you have a phone and you like hold it this way and it does the screen one way, and then you hold it this way and it turns it the other way. It does that because of an accelerometer, where essentially it's detecting kind of gravity. It's not technically gravity, but it's acceleration, which is a little different. So I started messing around with this a little bit, and accelerometers most of the time are used to, they're basically, you get a bunch of data coming from a device, and then a computer interprets that data, and so you get things like where, if you make this motion or something, like with your phone, it'll like change your gyroscope or something, it'll, calibrate that. But I started thinking, almost every instrument has essentially one variable that you mess with. So for instance, like a guitar or violin or any of the other stringed instruments, you have a string, and then you mess with the string, you change the pitch, you change how hard you hit it, and then you use your fingers to do that. So you might do it with the bow, you might do it with plucking, you might strum, whatever. You have a trumpet, and you have a column of air that you have an embouchure, and you're getting like a buzzing sound with your lips, and you're altering the column of air to make different sounds. And then like a flute, you have a column of air. I don't understand how a flute works, but it's pretty cool. And all of the instruments essentially are kind of like just one big idea that you mess with. And so I started thinking, like, what would it be like to play an accelerometer? And so that's what was kind of the genesis of this. And I started just messing around. And I iterated, probably 1,000 different ideas in code. I had to learn how to code. I had never coded anything. I actually have 3 really good friends who are all professional coders. And I told them my idea, and one after another, they were like, "You should just learn how to code yourself, because you're going to be bothering me every single day. Hey, why don't you change this thing?" And they were right. It was lots of YouTube playlists and stuff to try to figure out how to get this thing to work. But yeah, I had a good friend also who was into hardware, and he showed me kind of like how to get an accelerometer, what a microcontroller is, like a little computer kind of thing. And after a few months, I brought it with me today. I lovingly refer to this as the bomb. I made this thing. Which basically it's so you saw my controller with 3 buttons. Well, there's my 3 buttons on the controller. There's my joystick, and then over here is a little wand that I used to hit with. This thing is so fragile, I don't want to mess with it too much. And there's my 2 buttons right there and right there. And this was part 1 of how to make the glide. So yeah, more iteration, more messing around. The first versions of it, like, it didn't have any gliding. It didn't do any of that stuff. But again, just trying to iterate and trying to figure out like what an accelerometer can do. So what happens with this instrument, with the accelerometers, is basically when I take I hold down a note over here. There are 3 different buttons, and the buttons combine into 7 different notes. So it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Just the white keys on the piano. And then whenever I get to whenever I want to play one of those notes, I make a hit with this hand over here. And essentially, I mean, I'm going to nerd out just for a second. You guys are here, might as well. Basically, the accelerometer will detect that something is speeding up. And then whenever it detects that something is slowing down, then it'll record what was that highest speed we got to. And then once if it continues slowing down and hits a threshold, it'll be like, oh, he's pulling back. And then it'll register that note. And it's very much like playing like an egg shaker or a handbell, something like that. It's a handbell that's like much more responsive, or an egg shaker that's actually more responsive than an egg shaker. I'll talk about it more in a little bit. And then, so these buttons control the note you pick. The thumbstick on the top controls if you want to do a sharp or a flat. So if I do like my C, and then I move this to the left, get a C flat, which is a B, C, C sharp. And then the fun part is the glide, where essentially what happens is I play a note, and then if I move my fingers, you see the note doesn't change. What it does is it stores what that note is, and it goes to it there. So this is a C, this is an E, and if I go C, like that. Does that make sense? Cool. So then I can just go to whatever note I want to. And then my right hand chooses the octave. So I've got 2 buttons over here, and I can do 4 octaves with just the 2 buttons. So like my lowest octave, and the next one is both buttons, then the top button, and then nothing, the highest octave. So 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So as a result, you get 48 different notes out of just 3 buttons, a joystick, and 2 buttons over here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. You actually get more than 48 because you can do, like I can do a C, or I can do a C flat, but I can also do a B. It's the same note, but
Were
2
you
different
aiming
ways to
for
play.
77?
What's that?
Were you aiming for 77?
77 notes? Well, I can actually do infinity notes.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that in a second. So with glide, I can move from one note to the next, and you can, if I do a really low note to a really high note, you can actually hear the accelerometer a little bit. So if I go, so there's a lowest note and highest note, and then you can hear my hand, like how your hand kind of shakes a little tiny bit. It's pretty sensitive. Which is why I set it to 45 degrees forward, 45 degrees backwards. So I get, and if I go farther than that, it's fine. If I go farther than that, it's fine. And this is one of the big sort of philosophies of this instrument that not a lot of other instruments have. For instance, a lot of instruments where you can change the pitch. So like the violin or the theremin, or I don't know, the automaton, if you've heard of that, or the slide guitar. Those instruments, you move the large motions, like you go from a really low note to a really high note with one motion, and then you do vibrato and you do tiny changes with the same motion. So it's like your finger on a violin has to be within a 64th of an inch in order to really sound in tune, right? So what I've done is I've split the 2 things in half, where this controls the big motions, the big pitch changes, and this controls tiny pitch changes. So I get that, and then that's my vibrato over there. So, and I can change the sensitivity. I can make kind of wacky, huge vibrato like that. So I can actually, and then I can change it back. So this is actually, it's really useful for microtonal stuff, but also not necessarily like weird microtonal stuff. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but there's a lot of electronic music that uses microtones, which is basically just notes that are in between the keys that are on the piano. But a lot of I can do stuff where you do really, really fine tuning that, for instance, like a choir does naturally. And I'll show you what I mean. So I got my loop pedal here. I'm going to just let's see, let me do lower note. Okay, so what that is that's a C and a G, and then I'm going to play an E, and I'm going to play it perfectly in tune, and it will sound okay. But if I flatten it a little bit, it kind of dials in. I don't like this sound. I gotta, let me do that again. There we go. Did you hear it? In tune, technically, actually in tune. So I think it's pretty cool because, like I said, I don't know of a lot of other instruments that allow you to do that besides the human voice or just being really, really good at the violin or the trombone, one of those other instruments. Let's see. So, all right, so I talked about how it works. Talked about a little bit of the history. After I made my crazy, thing over there, I came up with a self-contained version of this, and I turned this on for the first time in about 5 years, and I was extremely happy that all the lights came on. And but one of the lights is not working that great. Let's see how. Yeah, that one right there. Come on, you can do it. There you go. No.
Sort of.
Just pretend. There you go. Okay, whatever. So yeah, same idea, except about, I don't know, twice the size as what I ended up with. I'm going to pass these out in a second so you can kind of look at it. But I ended up putting an entire microcontroller in here. And then there's an absolute nasty rat's nest of wires inside this little box. It took me over a month just to do the wiring for it. And then whenever I got it to turn on, it actually worked. I think that was maybe the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. No offense to my children. But anyway, so that's the instrument that I ended up using whenever I applied for the Guthman Musical Instrument Competition, which is it's a competition that's held at Georgia Tech. They always use this line. I think the Guardian one time called it the Pulitzer Prize of musical instruments or musical instruments invention. But anyway, I'm going to play something for you real quick. It's only 3 minutes. It's me playing this piece, Vocalese by Rachmaninoff, and with my friend Cindy playing piano. But this was using that first prototype there, or that first kind of functional prototype. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'm wearing the same shirt. It's my cool shirt.
You have more than one?
No, not really. I feel like I'm cheating getting clapped for something I did like years and years ago. but anyway, so yeah, like I said, a lot of instruments have tried to do this kind of thing where you can slide from note to note, and kind of, you know, famously like the theremin. But a lot of people don't know about some of the other ones that were kind of like the ones that came after the theremin that were trying to do the theremin better than the theremin did it. Because if you've ever played a theremin, it's a very difficult instrument. Like, I think everybody agrees on that. I mean, there's one right on the other side of this wall if you want to try it out. You know, you have to, like, kind of like with the violin, you have to be within a 16th of a note of an inch or 64th of an inch, but you don't have any reference point. You can't touch anything. You're just like floating in the air, and you're just like holding your breath and hoping that, you know, it's okay. So anyway, after the theremin came along, there was another instrument called the En Martineau, which is lesser known. I think it's become a little bit more famous recently because Johnny Greenwood, the guitarist for Radiohead, uses one. And it's a beautiful instrument, and the way it works is very cool because it's kind of like a keyboard. It has kind of like a printout of a keyboard, and it has a little ring that is connected to a wire. And you run the wire up and down, and it changes the pitch. And then with your right hand, it has a little pedal that you push, and that changes your volume. I'll show you real quick. This is kind of a fun clip. It's from 1934. So I think that's really cool. Same kind of idea where you're trying to make an instrument where you can glide from one note to another. There's another one that came out, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years after that. Sometimes it's called the electro-theremin. I like it called the tannerin. And this is the instrument that was used. Like, for instance, a lot of people think that Good Vibrations, the Beach Boys song, they think it's a theremin. It's not a theremin, it's one of these things. And it's pretty cool. It's the same idea, except it's on a little roll bar, and you have a knob, this knob down here to change the volume. And the guy doesn't actually play anything, but now we see how it works. So there's that, and then one of my favorite instruments, the pedal steel, which we all know what pedal steel sounds like, but a lot of people don't know kind of what it actually looks like whenever you're playing it.
This is the GFI.
I'm going to fast forward the commercial part.
Great second. Check it out. And here it is in action.
So what you'll notice is that the volume is controlled with this left foot. The large motion is controlled with his left hand, and then kind of the smaller motion is controlled with his foot over here. So that's an instrument that does actually split it up into two things. I've always loved the slide or the pedal steel, but what surprises me is how little he actually like moves his hand, and you'll see that with pedal steel players. Like, they'll move their hand to the right spot, and then they'll do kind of like, they'll do a little bit of bravado, and then they'll do all the pitch changes and stuff will be done with the feet, with the pedals. So yeah, different ways to kind of approach the same sort of issues. I'm going to go back to this one and pause it just because it's a black screen. There we go. So my goals with with developing this instrument, I had basically 3 big musical goals, and I had 3 big like accessibility goals. So my musical goals were I wanted something that was relatively easy to learn, like that had a nice smooth learning curve. So for instance, like the piano has a wonderful learning curve. Like if you do 1 hour of practice on the piano, you will get 1 hour better. Whereas if you do 1 hour of practice on the violin, you'll get like 15 seconds better. You know what I mean? So, and then like after you've been playing violin for 10 years or whatever, then you'll start finally, making music and stuff. But it's pretty tough. So the learning curve on the violin is like just this sheer cliff. I don't know. It goes this way and then that way. Depends what your X and Y axes are. And then on the piano, it's more just a smooth line where you're like, yeah, I'm playing, I'm getting better, I'm playing, I'm getting better, I'm playing, I'm getting better. What a great idea. So I wanted something that I could do that with, and with the glide, that's why I have those features that you can turn on and off, where basically if you just get it out of the box, you can mess around and you can turn all the glide stuff and the volume stuff and everything is all turned off. You can just can't do it. I guess it can't do it. And you can just kind of mess around with notes, and then once you get used to that, you can do your glide. And then you can start doing fun stuff like there's a little button back here. I don't know if I told you about that. This little button, once you play a note, it will change the pitch whenever you change your button. So I'm gonna hit this little button, and I'm gonna. Like that. And then even more fun than that is whenever I go into that legato mode, I can combine that with some of the glide stuff, and then I can combine those 2 things together. This is something that I've just kind of messed around with. Like that. So it's basically what I was shooting for is to make something that has a very simple interface that you can just mess around with a lot, and you can play around with it, which is, kind of the whole point, you know what I mean? So I wanted to do something that had a smooth learning curve. I wanted it to be something that was ergonomic, where you didn't have to have like perfect anatomy to do it. So if you play the trumpet, like I know somebody who plays the trombone, and he got Bell's palsy, and he couldn't play the trombone anymore because like part of his mouth wouldn't work. You know what I mean? If there are tons of people who play violin or piano and other instruments where they get things like what's it called, focal dystonia, where like basically your fingers will clamp up on you, and so you have to have like absolutely. You got it? Okay,
different one.
So I was like, oh no, I just triggered somebody here. So anyway, you have to have basically perfect anatomy. And so I wanted to invent an instrument where you didn't have to have perfect anatomy. You could have, basically, if you have 3 functional fingers over here, you have 2 functional fingers in the other hand. And these are interchangeable, by the way. These are symmetrical, and I designed it for that reason. If you're left-handed, if you're right-handed, you can use your dominant hand to do the hitting part, which is what I do. But as long as you have 5 functional fingers total, and you can move your arms, then you can play a musical instrument, which I think is I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's unusual for a musical instrument. And then lastly, that it would be like financially accessible. So like I thought it was funny at the beginning of that video with the On Martineau. It said basically there have been no new musical instruments invented in the last 100 years. And now like here in 2025, I'm like, there have only been like 3 musical instruments invented because there have actually been thousands of musical instruments invented, but not many of them have become kind of standards where we actually know what they are. And there's a few different reasons for that. Again, I feel like I mess with the violin a lot, but the violin, imagine somebody invented the violin right now and it didn't exist. and they were like, hey, check out this cool instrument I have. and could do nothing on it at all. It's a barrier to entry. You need to have an instrument that somebody can actually play, but also has some depth to it. And another kind of unfortunate thing is that a lot of times the person who invents the instrument has to be able to play the instrument. And sometimes people who invent instruments aren't very good musicians to start with, so they can't really like show off what it does. So there's one big barrier to entry. And then the physical aspect, the musical aspect, like that's kind of what I was talking about before, where you can, with this, you can turn things on and off. You can start simple. I rewatched my TED Talk from a few years ago this morning. I haven't done one of these talks in a little while. And I said those three things. And what I didn't say was also the problems with a worldwide pandemic and the supply chain issues that pop up as a result of it. So like I unveiled this in 2019, and then the first ones were supposed to ship in June of 2020. And like the microcontroller that it used at that time, like Ford also wanted to use it, and so they would be like, we're just going to buy all 10 million that are on the market. so as a result, it's been rough, but I'm finally getting back to I had to change the design completely, change all these little chips and stuff, and anyway, so there's a lot of barriers to entry whenever it comes to introducing a new musical instrument and getting it to actually stick is the big thing, because we can make prototypes pretty easily. Like the bomb over there, that was about, I don't know, $75 worth of parts maybe. So it's not too hard financially, but then you have to do all the coding and everything like that. But then getting it actually into production is a really tough thing. So I'll show you what that first one was. I'm going to pass this around. This was version 1 that got shipped out. I think that's like glide number 3. One of my friends down in Atlanta got it, and he let me borrow it so I could show it here.
HDMI.
Yeah, it's an HDMI cable, and that's actually a design choice, because a lot of new musical instruments will use weird cables, and then the company will go out of business, and you can't find the cable anymore, and the instrument dies as a result of it. So yeah, I was like, I'm going to use a cable that will be around for another 2 years before we airdrop everything. So that was version 1, and then a few years later, whenever I've revamped everything, this is the current version. I made that one this morning. So I'm going to ship that off. I've got about 130 orders that I have to fill in, so I was like, if I'm going to show you one, I should just make it and then I'll ship it this week. So it's a lot smaller. You notice it's a lot more ergonomic. It's lighter. It's basically, I don't want to say practically perfect in every way. I'm happy with it. I think it's in good shape.
Sometimes heavier is nice because you get a feel for it.
It can be, yeah. When you're like moving your arms around for too long, it gets pretty rough. So, so yeah, that was kind of like the invention of the glide up to that point. Let me just stop for a second. What questions do we have so far? Yes.
I'm waiting for the price.
The price. It's $250.
Oh.
So, and I'm hoping to actually bring the price down. And I shouldn't say that as a business person. It's never going to be cheaper. It's only going to go up. Buy now. So nobody has ever accused me of being a brilliant business person. Yeah. What else?
When you do whole notes, are you using the even tempered scale or just multiples of the frequency? Are you using 12th to 2?
Like the octaves and stuff. It starts with the even temper tuning. So that's what I was talking about. Like those are all just like straight down the line piano notes.
Yeah.
But you can take every single one of those,
Bend them.
and that's how you get the vibrato, but it's also how you can get the little note bends and stuff. So that's what I was talking about with the getting the major chord like perfectly tuned. Yes.
So if you wanted a pitch in a different octave, you finger, say, a C up to an E, but you want the E that's below that C.
Yeah.
It happens in the other hand.
Yeah, so this hand controls the octave, and there are all sorts of weird design choices that you make along the way. But one of them is that, like people always think it's weird that I did the octave break where I did basically if you have C, D, E, F, and then the octave break is right there, G, A, B, C. So if I'm in one position, so there's my F, and if I do with the same octave it goes down. So an entire octave will be from the G. And then if I want to go up to the next octave, and then I'm going to release this finger. Like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And there's a reason for that, which is transposition. So I didn't want to just have it in the key of C. This is another accessibility thing. I wanted to be able, instead of making it so you have to learn 12 different scales, 12 different major scales, I just made it so that you can instantly transpose the instrument on the fly. So if I do, so what I could do is, like, again, this is my C, and if I hold the second note right here, which is a whole step above the C, and I hold my thumbstick back, like remember left and right with sharp and flat, if I hold my thumbstick back, it'll go up a whole step. And then if I do it again, it goes up another whole step, another whole step. So I can do this crazy. And that's what I was saying. I can do a larger than a piano range. I can go. Let's see how far I'm going. Maybe some of this rotates. Okay, get ready. Yeah, that's about as high as it goes.
I couldn't hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, very large range. And then, so that's chromatic transposition, so I can change into any key, and I can change back to C at any time. So there I am at C. I can also do, I call it diatonic transposition, which isn't, I don't think it's actually a real term, but same idea, but now I can go up or down the scale really quickly by pushing the thumbstick forward and then holding like a note, and then I'll go up one note but stay in the same key. So you can do scales really easily. So, like that. And one of my favorite tricks is I can do the generic computer sound on like old like 70s and 80s TV shows, which is let's see if I remember how to do this. There you go. One person laughed.
I didn't watch TV then.
No, you didn't watch it. Anytime somebody would be like, "There's a computer," it would make that sound. So
Okay.
yes.
Can you change the output to, like a...
Oh yeah, it's a MIDI device, so I can change it to whatever. I will get to that in 1 second. Anything else before I move on?
I'm curious who your customers are for the most part.
Weirdos, most of them. And I mean that in a really good way. So I mean, the first set of customers were people who I've got several people in the room who bought one. So the first customers who bought one were kind of like just techie gadget people, that people just cool gadget, I'll buy anything. And then you started getting like more and more experimental people, and then now I'm kind of moving into slightly more, I don't want to say mainstream, but people. It's the thing is that this is a weird instrument that can play very normal music, whereas a lot of times weird instruments plays weird music, and I can play weird music on it, but that's not kind of like the main thing. So yeah, after I did all that. After I, like it's called the glide because you can glide from one note to another. And I actually chose that name pretty intentionally because it's a generic word. Again, I'm not a good businessman because I can't copyright it. And I did that intentionally because I want it to genericize. I want, whenever my patent is up in another 17 years or whatever, I want it to be that Roland can release a glide, and I'm going to lose all my money at that point, but whatever. I want the main goal is that I want the instrument to survive, And I mean, if I make some money along the way, I'm not going to complain about that, but that's not the main goal because, like I was saying, it's so hard for a musical instrument to get invented and to get adopted. So like, for instance, like what instruments have been widely adopted within the last 100 years? There's a few. There's several.
Synthesizer.
Yeah, lots of synthesizers.
Yeah.
Vibraphone.
Vibraphone.
Yeah.
I'll give you a few more.
Record scratching.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the turntables is a legit instrument, very much so. But like the electric bass is one. That's an instrument that couldn't have existed before electronics and before the technology allowed it. You know, the theremin we talked about, you know, which is, I don't know. I think more people know what the theremin is than actually like enjoy playing it. I should stop bashing other instruments. And then you have the drum machine. Roger Lynn, me and Chris, and probably several other people in here have talked to him a lot. He's become a good friend and mentor. He invented the first drum machine that used samples. It basically was the first drum machine that sounded really good. And so, like, if you listen to Prince or Madonna, all that stuff from the 80s and all those drum machines, if it's not an 808, which is like a synthesizer drum machine, and it sounds kind of real, but kind of like a drum machine, it was probably one of Roger Lynn's instruments or something that he inspired.
Allen Electronic Organs is all sampling. There's no tubes involved.
Yeah. And I mean, there are definitely a few more. But, like the electric guitar is a guitar, just with pickups. And there's lots of cool stuff that has been done with the electric guitar, but it's not necessarily like a brand new instrument, It's kind of just an evolution of the guitar. Same thing with, lots of keyboards and stuff. So, it's hard to get a new instrument kind of adopted. Yes.
Have you written music for it or written materials for it?
I've written definitely a few little things, but I'm in the process of getting composers to write for it. So let me talk about something else, which is that after I had invented the instrument, after I had released it and everything, I'd learned how to program, and I was getting ideas for other instruments. But I started thinking, it's like, what if I used this instrument, just used this interface, and did this other stuff that I wanted a new instrument to do? So I have a good friend who he was asking me for a drum mode, like just to be able to play drums, and I kind of messed around with it a little bit, trying to do something where like you play a note and it would just trigger a drum, but then you have to play more. I mean, really for drums you need to be able to do multiple notes at the same time, and it was going to be just really hard to like just get exactly like boom, like only press the note exactly when you needed it. And I was like, well, I've got 5. I need to be able to play notes simultaneously, and I only have 6 buttons if I use the thumbstick, and it's going to be like a bear to assign a new drum to each one. And then I was like, duh, it's got an accelerometer in it. I can use that to my advantage. So what I did is I made it so that this hand controls the direction of hit. So for instance, I'm using these little symbols. If I hold down this bottom button, it only works on the front hit. And if I do the top button, it only works on the back hit, that part. So it allows me, if I kind of just go back and forth, I can do fairly complicated rhythms. And then I can use the accelerometer to choose different notes. So with this button right here, that's my cymbal button, cymbals. This is hi-hat, and then open hi-hat. So, and then I get a ride cymbal, whoops, and then I get a crash cymbal, like that. And then I've got a little button on the back that does toms, like that. And then first button is the kick drum, and the middle button is the snare. And so I put all this together. If I just stay right here and I just use just this, I can do some simple drum beats, but then if I start to add in this stuff, I get then I can change the tempo. So anyway, you can clap for that. That's what you
Those are all sample sounds?
Yeah, those are all sampled sounds, and like since it is MIDI, I can change it to whatever. So here's the 808 that I was talking about. And you get some of the fun sound like that. So what it allowed me to do, like whenever I was inventing the glide to start with, is that my whole goal is to have these very like human motions. You know what I mean? Because most musical instruments are not designed around the human body. What they're designed around is acoustics. So what really kind of got me started on this idea of like accessibility, like physical accessibility, is that I teach guitar, and like got one guitar student. Well, you took bass, right?
The bass.
So, and I noticed that almost every guitarist at some point, they start having like issues with their wrists, or they feel, I don't know, weird whenever they play. And it actually makes sense when you think about it, because like for an acoustic guitar, like your right hand is going to be kind of like in this sort of cranked over like this. Your left hand is going to be under like this. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for both hands. You know what I mean? And I was wondering, like, why is that? I was like, well, because in order to make a guitar, you have to have a string that is at tension, and in order for a string to be at tension, it has to be straight. So you can't have something that's more ergonomic. You have to yield to the physics of the instrument. And so it made me realize that instruments are not made for humans. They're made to make sound, and then they modify it just enough so that a human, if they really work at it really hard, can play it. So I can't remember if a student said this or what, but they were saying like, it'd be great, instead of having a guitar where you did this, if this hand just kind of turned into this much more natural position like this, and then instead of strumming like this hand over here would turn into a more natural position like that. And so that's essentially, what the glide ended up being. So I can do that all day. It's just a very human sort of natural motion. And since it's light, you can move it around and you don't get tired after a while. So, once I did drum mode, and I want to brag on drum mode a little bit, because I think it's a little bit underrated as far as the glide goes. You notice like lots of dynamic possibilities. And it's also, it's very easy to swing, which is not something that's very, it's not very easy if you're playing like keyboard drums or something. So whenever I'm playing, if I kind of just loosen my wrist a little bit, you get that nice swing. And if I tighten up the wrist, then I get more. Jeez. You get more of a straight rhythm. So, so once I did drum mode, I have another friend who was like, "What if you made like a chord mode?" And I kind of went through the same process where I was like, "Well, how would you do chord mode?" And again, I've got some buttons. I mean, there's a lot of different chords on a piano, and so it's going to be hard to do that. But again, I started thinking, use the accelerometer. And so what I came up with was essentially where, if you remember, like whenever I was going through the notes in the melodic mode, it was C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So if I did the same idea, at C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. And then I could use the thumbstick to change sharps and flats, and now I can use the thumbstick forward and backwards to change the type of chord. So for instance, this is an F, but if I push the thumbstick forward, I get an F minor, or an F diminished. And I essentially came up with this, I figured out, went through and I basically did this chart where I figured out how to do, I guess it's 48 different chords, where you have a major chord, minor chord, augmented chord, or diminished chord. Is that right? Yeah. So major, minor, diminished, and augmented, with all 12 notes as a root note. Okay, so that got the chords. Figured out the chords that way. But then, you know, I mean, it's a little boring. So I started thinking about using the accelerometer again. And so I did. And just like with drum mode, I made it so that you can do front hits with one hand or with one button, do back hits with the other button. And so it's kind of like drum mode, just with a bunch of notes. So now, and then I can do this, this is 3 notes. That's 6 notes. And this is 1 note. And you might be like, why would you do 1 note? It's because of this. So you do, let's say, so yeah, lots of stuff that you can do.
So you can control the inversion.
Yeah, exactly. So if any of you keyboard players in here, you might have noticed that whenever I did, it kind of stayed in the same place. It didn't go like, like John Greer calls it, the snowman voice hangs, the C, da, 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 da. It was like da 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 da. I can't play piano, but so if I do down here, same thing. And then you can go. Like that. So that's drum mode, that's piano mode. And let's see. All right, okay, it's almost 4. Any questions about those two?
Quick question.
Sure.
For the, and you may have said this when I was out of the room, but for the piano mode, what do you use for the sample of the piano?
I'm using GarageBand. It's
Okay.
just very simple.
So their Yamaha sample or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, since it's a MIDI instrument, you can mess around with all sorts of cool stuff. So
And can you change the MIDI source easily? Like if you wanted to use a different plug-in piano sound?
yeah,
for that?
definitely. Yeah. So like I did marimba. Like that.
What I'm getting at is if you wanted to use one of our sample
Oh, yeah.
harpsichords, you could
For sure.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you wanted to play harpsichord, I'm curious, does the harpsichord, does it limit the dynamic range? Does it make it so it's all just one dynamic
For the most
range?
part, but the pianos have full form.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not bashing it. That's the way a harpsichord should be.
That's
you know?
right.
It's always
It does
weird.
have a sustain pedal, which you can't have in a normal harpsichord. So.
Gotcha. That's cool. Yeah, it always bothers me whenever I do like an organ sound on a keyboard, and then like you can like change the dynamics by hitting it harder.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Any other questions about keyboard mode or drum mode? All right. Seeing none. Moving on. Okay, so I've invented, like I said, a couple of other instruments. I've invented an instrument that is kind of like keyboard and drum mode, but you actually use a keyboard. And so basically you use the right hand here, and you do the same kind of thing, but you use a keyboard to actually hold down the notes, and you use a keyboard to do to trigger the drum sounds and stuff. You get a little bit more versatility just because you've got, a bunch of different notes that you could choose from. But the one I'm excited about right now is actually a wind instrument. It's an acoustic wind instrument that is electronically controlled. So I want to show you something real quick. About a year ago, someone contacted me online, and said that it was the person I was talking about where he played trombone and his face he had Bell's palsy and he couldn't play trombone anymore. And so he asked us like, what should I do? And I was trying to find all these sort of like automated ways that you could play trombone. Like there's these like Honda trumpet playing robots and stuff. Like how do they make that sound? And it kind of led me down this rabbit hole of all sorts of wind instruments that are electronically controlled, and there aren't that many of them. But this video, let's see.
With sampling, you could do anything, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, my heart and soul is with acoustic instruments. You know, like there's just something really magical and great about being able to like pick up an instrument and just have actual sound come out of the actual instrument. You know what I mean?
That's what you sample.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can all, yeah. So I found this video from Mr. Wizard, and he's talking about it. Okay, so I think this is hilariously like this would never fly today. The beginning of this. Okay, so how this starts out. Literally just blowing an air siren in this little girl's face. You can see the wind off of it is like blowing the air. But then it gets even better. He talks a little bit about different kinds of sirens and goes to this kind of thing, which is a disc-based siren. And this thing is an actual saw blade that he has mounted.
And notice
It has these
the
little
outside
holes.
row are all nice and even.
Yeah.
So is the second, third, fourth, are all nice and even row.
Yeah.
Except that row over there is not even.
No, all the holes are different.
Yeah, there's 2 there, and there's 5 here, 2, 3, 5. Now I'm going to turn it on, and then I want you to put that in your mouth, and then with the other end, you blow right into those holes, and hear what happens.
Okay, here comes my favorite part.
Just be careful now with your fingers. Okay.
It's like, come on, closer.
Use your fingers.
Fine.
Okay, try again.
But it makes this pretty cool sound. That's what I found out.
He had not blown background right.
What's that?
He had not dulled the blade.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was wondering. Like, it still has the full teeth on it. So anyway, I found this, which is a Yamaha in Japan. They made musical sirens, and they sound like up close. They sound terrible, but check this out. So they sound pretty bad because you're so close and you hear the machinery and everything. But they're crazy loud, and then they sound like this from a distance. So I thought that was super cool. Like, I mean, I don't know,
But
maybe
it's a warning sign, right?
No, I think this is purely musical. I think it's kind of like church bells.
Oh, the greasy, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I started researching a little bit about how these sirens work and how these musical sirens specifically work, and so I started messing around and trying to figure out something that I could do myself. And so what I came up with was this. Let's see. So this is so all it is basically like a little fan. So it has the little holes in it, just like the saw blade did. And then I've got this pressure sensitive button that can go faster or slower. And so what I've termed this is, I call it the Wicca whistle. So we're talking about like the DJ turntables. So you can do kind of the same thing with this. You blow into it, you get this. Like that.
So when does the cartoon start?
And then what's also cool is that you can change the disc, and so that one had, I don't know if you can see, it had like 9 holes in it. This one is literally just one giant hole, and I should have printed the disc in like a different color so you guys see it. So this is the bass disc, and this is the like techno dubstep disc. I was like. Like that. So that is my jumping off point for my next musical instrument, which, you know, big secret here, you know, don't tell anybody. But essentially I'm going to make an instrument that is acoustic. It uses that principle, but that you can actually control the pitch. And I've got a few ideas about how that's going to work. And I've actually taken some ideas from the glide about how it works, about making something that you can change the pitch and make it glide from one note to another. Be really fast. You can hopefully be easy to play, all that kind of thing. So that's kind of like my next adventure, and that's about it for what I've got. Any questions?
That's all with an Airstream.
Yeah, that's all just acoustic. Like there's no, like, the only noise that you hear is just the fan. It's a little DC motor. Yes.
Wow, what do your children think of this stuff? This has a market for children. You're being very scientific, and it's wonderful how much you know about it as a background, but oh my gosh, it has such potential for kids.
Yeah, I like I was talking about the accessibility aspect. I designed that with price in mind. So, like I sell those for $60 now, and I'm hoping to get the price down a little bit. Again, bad business on my part to tell you that.
You mentioned
David.
before about printing the disc in there. Do you 3D print a lot of
Oh
stuff?
yeah, yeah. This is like the glides that went around the room, and these are all 3D printed, and that's actually a really important aspect of the design process, because people are like, well, why don't you get, you know, like plastic injection molded or whatever? I was like, well, I've designed with the glide, I've designed probably 500 different cases.
Wow.
Like just various little versions of it where I've messed around and iterated. If I felt that I was super happy with one of those cases, I could pay $10,000 to get a mold made for plastic injection, and then I could make each plastic mold for 50 cents a piece or 1 cent a piece, and then like the next week I'd be like, oh crap, I should have done this, and I want to change it. So it's kind of like it's kind of a numbers game. It's like if you know you're going to sell 1 million of them or something, you need to have each one be 2 pennies a piece.
Right.
Than plastic injection molding would. But otherwise, like I've learned a lot about 3D printing, and what I've done, like with this, you can see. You can pass that around if you want to. I don't know if you want to blow into it, but, basically you can 3D print something, and you can do something called fuzzy skin, where it basically has some bumps on the outside, and so I print it. It's a little bit bumpy, and then I sand it off, and it gets this really nice texture that kind of feel. That's the same way with the glide. With the newer version of the glide is it's 3D printed, bumpy, and then it's sanded, and it has this nice texture to it. I actually, whenever I first started doing 3D printing stuff, I just to see what it was like, I sanded one down until it was like a bathtub toy level of like perfect shininess, and I kind of hated it. It just felt like gross in my hand. So if you notice like any like game controller or anything like that, any part that your hand actually touches is like sandblasted to have that kind of like bumpy texture to it. So I was like, I'm going to do that and not spend $10,000 on the mold. So.
Do you have guitar mode?
I mean, that's kind of what chord mode is, but I do have I have like a power chord mode, which is kind of fun. So I'm gonna keyboard. So, see, I remember how to do this. So yeah, and you know, using MIDI, I can choose like a more guitarish kind of sound, but yeah. Yeah.
Again, I know you probably mentioned this when I was out, but are you running this through a DAW or how are you?
Yeah, this is just going through GarageBand.
Okay.
And I actually designed this again with the accessibility aspect in mind.
So any plugin will work?
Yeah, like you could, like I got it to run on a 40-year-old nasty Yamaha keyboard that was in my kid's.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, using like the 5-pin like adapter and stuff like that. Yeah.
So is this how you make a living, or is this a hobby?
It's definitely, it's a passion that has been a living, and then like I said, all the supply chain issues and stuff like that. I also got some money stolen by a vendor, so I had to like ramp up my teaching. I'm hoping in the long run that it goes back where I can support myself more from doing this, and not just from the glide, but from doing the other musical instruments that I'm developing. So if anybody wants to, give me $1 million, I would not protest. So
Do you have a website?
I do. Theglide.com. Just hopefully easy to remember. Yeah, theglide.com. So, cool. Anything else?
But wouldn't there be an opportunity for venture capital? And
Probably.
Shark Tank. Shark Tank. It's quite fun.
Yeah. One of my conversations I had with Roger Lynn was interesting to me. Like I was talking about all this kind of business stuff, and he was like, "Do you want to be an inventor or a businessman?" And I was like, I definitely, I wouldn't mind being a brilliant businessman, but my passion is with being an inventor. And so, I've kind of toyed around with, partnering up with different people who are like big business people, and I'm kind of getting closer to that kind of ideal soon. But yeah, like I said, my passion is about getting the instrument out, and it's about designing the instrument, and but I need somebody, who likes counting beans, and tax, stuff and all that kind of stuff too.
Gotta agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Anything else? Yeah.
What are your lead times on the wicker whistle?
The wicker whistle. I've got one issue with it that I'm trying to fix, but it's not. I've almost got it solved. Basically, it overheats if you play it for too long, so I got to change to a different transistor on the inside. But it's probably not terribly long. I don't know, a month or so.
All right.
I've got a few that I've got made that have the heating problem that I haven't shipped out, and that's why, including that one. But like I said, those are relatively simple to make. Like they're not, and I made it so that was a part of my sort of calculus of design, is I wanted to make something that I could actually do the wiring. So I've got a very simple little circuit board. I just have to solder in like 5 different wires, and I'm done. Whereas with the Glide, I had to have like a custom made circuit board that was, and like make it, micro sized and all that. So, yeah.
maybe I missed it, but how did you ultimately help your trombonist friend?
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I know. It was one of those things. I did design like 3 or 4 different like ideas, but the acoustics of how an embouchure works and how it hits a pitch and stuff is really complicated. And it's like those robots that could play trumpet and stuff like that. They have the ability to make just micro little adjustments that no human could do on the fly. So I don't know. I'm hoping that his Bell's palsy just gets better. So yes, Chris.
On the Glide, did you do the printed circuit board design yourself?
No, I didn't. Darius Mostalfi, I don't know if you know him. He's a collaborator with Roger Len. He did the circuit board for L'Instrument, which I think you play, right?
Yeah.
So L'Instrument is another really cool, like newer musical instrument. It's a MIDI instrument. And so anyway, he did the circuit board design for that, and he's done, I think, several of Roger's other things. And so he recommended him, and he's been a really good advisor.
And you're working with outside assembly houses for the electronics assembly?
Yep. Yeah, there's a company in California that is about to make 125 for me. So
Avoid China.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's been an issue. So believe it or not. So all right, cool.
Thank you.
I think that's about it.
All right, thank you.
And if any of y'all want to try it, I can stay around for a little bit. So.